It's working now. Okay. We'll give it a second.
Well, if you hit watch live video, I just saw Cindy go over there to sit
Okay,
down.
so it's working.
Okay,
But,
All right, we're all good.
but when you go here on Facebook, it doesn't really.
or now. Okay.
Okay.
We're good.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, so no one's come forward for
Keep on your
public
toes.
comments. We'll move forward with business and discussion items. First up, we have the Kester House Museum. We have Karen here to speak to that. Hello, Karen.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Karen Hughes, and I serve as the secretary for the Kester House Museum Advisory Board. Other board members, Sharon Kessinger is here. She serves on the board as well. The advisory board met last Tuesday to discuss paying the salary for the tour guide for the Kester House Museum. One of the duties of the advisory board is to make recommendations to the city council, and we voted to make the following recommendations: that the governing body comply with the 2024 city budget by transferring $5,000 from the transient guest tax fund to the Kester Block Maintenance Fund as certified on pages 70 and 71 of the 2024 budget. The advisory board also recommends transferring an additional $4,000 from the transient guest tax fund to the Kester Block Maintenance Fund, and that the two transfers totaling $9,000 be specifically used to pay for the salary of a tour guide for the 2024 season for the Kester House Museum. I realize the Admin and Finance Committee met last Wednesday and discussed transferring from the Transient Guest Tax Fund into the Kester Block Fund, but indicated an end date of April 1, 2025 for any funding for the Kester House Museum. Now, I realize there hasn't been any motion or anything made so far, but Mr. Mayor, the question is, does the council have that option? Or would that be considered a binding decision about the 2025 budget?
It would not be a binding decision.
Okay.
Committees are not empowered to make binding decisions, only recommendations to the entire council.
But I realize that was the my understanding was that the committee was going to recommend to the council to do it that way.
And
I'm questioning the part about putting an end date on there. That's the part I'm concerned about.
Sure, and I think that was one of those where, though that was the committee's recommendation, it would be something the whole council would need to chew on. And that's part of the reason why we don't let committees make binding decisions, is
Sure.
because we want every voice that's up here.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad you had already thought about that. That's great. So, because as you know, you haven't even drafted or approved the budget yet for 2025, so okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. We very much appreciate that the council is addressing this issue. Thank you.
I did have one question.
Okay.
I believe City Administrator Haverkamp had reached out about setting up a meeting.
Yes.
Has there been any progress with us getting?
I haven't heard back.
I know he's out
Yes.
right now on
Yes.
personal business, but.
He indicated
My understanding that he was going to get in touch with the president of the foundation, and for sure, because that's who we were asking to take it over. And then, I think the president of the advisory board as well. And and then let them inform their members. That's how he told me he was gonna handle it.
I just want to make sure.
But I don't know how far it got.
I want to make sure communication.
Right, Mr.
going.
Ballon, Ralph Ballon is the chair, but actually he doesn't have email, but he does have a phone number, so he could reach him that way. But no, Mr. Haverkamp did send me an email about it, so.
All right, I just want to make sure we've got communication.
You bet.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can hold off till the standing committee reports to go through that, unless you want to tackle it right now.
Why even go over it now without you guys meeting first? Or do you want to
Well,
go ahead and do that?
we can split it. So the way I look at it is, we need to solve the immediate problem, but then there's the long problem. So I think I agree on the deadline side of that discussion. I think that's a little bit ahead of, we're a cart ahead of the horse on that. But as far as the transfers to take care of this year, I think we do need to go ahead and, if we are going to recommend that, give that recommendation now.
You want to do it?
Yeah, we can go ahead and.
Standing committee
We just wait?
reports. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, next we have the ATIP planting grant, Blue River Rail Trail.
Mr. Mayor, I must have misunderstood your proclamation. I thought it was wear cobalt blue today. Great minds think alike. I have a couple things before we talk about the grant. I am taking my summer vacation to Healdsburg, California. And I'm sure they have fancy billboards or great brochures and a fabulous website, but I'm going there because on my plane ride to Birmingham, the lady sitting next to me, Susie, invited me within the first 3 minutes of our conversation to Healdsburg. And it reminded me of conversations that we've had before about how people like to travel to places where people love to live. Susie loves to live in Healdsburg, California, population 14,000. She owns a winery there. And as we talked, she talked about their great events. She talked about their beautiful downtown, how it was a gathering spot for the community. And as I listened to that conversation, I thought, this is what we mean. And so that really is on my mind of places I want to travel. Well, people around here are doing the same thing. I just found out this week we have a surprise mystery tour coming from O'Neill, Nebraska. And I just thought they found us. Well, they found us because Bob Kloppenborg invited them. Bob Kloppenborg knows there's an O'Neill travel agency in O'Neill, Nebraska. And so Bob went to them and said, hey, I think you should come down to Marysville, and here's why. And so here we have 41 people coming on Thursday on their mystery tour. They don't know where they're going, and hopefully they're not listening to our meeting tonight, or I've blown the surprise. And then Charlie Fredericks was in my office today from the Pony Express barn. They're getting a lot of phone calls from people who want to come and take tours. And so Charlie then says, well, could we plan the rest of your trip for you? If you want to come to the Pony Express Museum, that's great, but while you're here, why don't you do? And so those are great examples of how we get people to come to Marysville. Obviously, it's great to have a fancy website, have billboards, we get all that. But more importantly, it's that message that each of us shares. Susie's business card is right here. The other interesting thing that I learned about Susie, I hadn't told her I was from Black Squirrel City, and she told me that her spirit animal is the squirrel. And I was like, what? Crazy. So I just ask us to think about the power of that simple invitation to come and visit Marysville. We had a great weekend at the Mother's Day Market. As we talked to all of our vendors, all 112 vendors were signed up. They all said their sales were about like they were last year. They didn't say sales were great, but they said sales were about last year. We surveyed visitors and we surveyed vendors to find out, hey, when you're here for Mother's Day Market, what kind of impact do you have on the community as a whole? So when we looked at the results of our visitors, 33% of them said, while I go to the Mother's Day Market, I also eat at a local restaurant. Another 33% said they stop and buy snacks or drink. Another 33% they said they fuel up. And 42% said they shop local. When I talked to Stacy McGrath at CJ Express West, she manages that location, I said, does Mother's Day Market have an impact on your business? And she laughed. She said, Wayne, it's our third busiest weekend of the year. First is Big Blue River Days. Second is the garage sales. Third is Mother's Day Market weekend. Vendors said, half of them said, 25% of them said they dine locally. 25% of them said they shop locally. As I looked at zip code data, you can see if you take like a 75-mile radius outside of Marysville, that seems to be where people are traveling to come to Mother's Day Market to give us ideas for where we might market in the future. So we see it's good for the economy, but even thinking back to Susie's comment about coming to Healdsburg, it's events like this that help give us pride in our community. It brings us together for these celebrations, so they serve important roles. So we also want to talk to you about the Blue River Rail Trail. I've got some helpers coming up here. As they come up here, I've got a couple of examples. This morning I got to work early since it was so rainy and I didn't do my walk. And I noticed there was someone outside of my office. And I'm like, I wonder what's going on. So I popped out and here was a bicycle rider at 6 in the morning. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, I'm bike riding from San Francisco to New York to see my friend. And I'm trying to figure out, do I hop on the trail and ride to Lincoln? I'm like, well, why don't you come in? I've got some coffee going. So as we sat and talked, the Blue River Rail Trail was one of the draws. He said, well, I came here because I want to ride the trail network. Another example, I'm a member of Evangelical United Church of Christ. We're in the search for a minister and have been for 16 months. We're now about ready to do our 5th interview with someone we hope becomes our minister. But he made it very clear early on in the process, the only reason he's considering us is because we have the Blue River Rail Trail. He owns 3 bikes, and he said biking and hiking and walking, that's all really important to me, so I want to have a strong rail system, and whatever church I go to, that community has to have that. So tonight we want to talk to you about a grant opportunity we have. I'm going to turn over to Sarah Kessinger. She'll get us started.
Good evening. I am a trail user, regular trail user, and a member of several groups that are advocates for the trail. And we've kind of come together in an informal group to work on a proposal to apply for a trail planning grant. And what we would like to ask the city to do would be to contribute toward that toward the match for that planning grant. And the trail, of course, has become a part of this community. But it's not done. We've got just those 3 blocks basically north of Center Street that when you drive through town on the highway and look north, you don't see a trail. And yet farther north from there is this incredibly beautiful asset that this town could really capitalize on. And I think we're missing the boat. And I hope that the city agrees that we could put some money toward this matching grant, and then from there we could develop a plan for how to fix those 3 blocks, including the drainage, and Rob will fill you more in on that detail. And that's, I think, basically what we're looking for.
So I'm not a huge user of the trail yet. I was on the original board at its conception, but I did buy my first real bike this evening, so maybe. So the idea here is that this grant is, like Sarah said, it's a planning grant where kind of the idea is that you've got a group here that's trying to gain some momentum for the city to see what's out there and see what's available. But one of the first steps is to get a master plan in place so that when they do find some available funds and that sort of thing, that we're already at the first step towards the threshold, so we're not then just picking the ball up and going. We already got it down the road a ways, and so that's the biggest idea, our biggest hope. Some of the things that if you ever look at, and of course I have some interest too because I'm a downtown business owner, but if you go to a lot of communities that have a trail down to them, it's amazing what they'll do economically. So it's is it the chicken or the egg thing, but I think there's enough evidence across the country that it's an amenity that is really good for a community, and where ours comes right down to our heart of our downtown, I think it just potentially could open up even more opportunity for that tax base that's going to probably be mostly from outside the community when they're going to come and eat meals and probably have a drink or two, or but the idea too is that they would have some overnight stays where they're not only going to just come for a few minutes and then get back and go back up north. They're truly it's going to be a destination. So anyway, that's kind of what our hope is, that this grant would be what would start the whole, looking at I know you guys have talked about drainage issues down there, and but but even just what is possible or what the opportunity could be adjacent to that corridor. And so that's kind of the idea with what we're wanting to do with the grant. So, and part of it is a 20% match. The commissioners have agreed to 5,000. They'd like to know what the city's going to do, and the Partnership for Growth is committed to 10,000. So a 20% match is, so 20,000 is where the 20%, so it's 100,000 minimum grant. So so here we are, I guess.
I'm Maureen Christ, and I have been on the trail board since its inception with Rob back in the beginning in 2006. The trail opened its first section in 2010 and steadily continued and did about 2-mile sections at a time till we got to the state line. At the same time, the Nebraska Trail System was building their trail down to the state line. And so currently, you may or may not know that you can ride from Marysville, Kansas, all the way to Lincoln and beyond. The National Rails to Trails Conservancy is working on the Great American Rail Trail, which is going from coast to coast. And our trail actually would connect to that. We have so many things going for us, but we've got just this 3-blocker onto North Street, which makes it just shy of half a mile. It's just this missing piece, and we need to get it done. We need to get it done because of safety issues. I mean, we all know that the unrestricted intersection there at the 7th Street corridor and Highway 36 is not a safe place. But beyond just that, we have people coming and they can't find the trail. I was asked to speak at a webinar that was put on by the Kansas State. It's called Trail Talk Tuesdays, and I was asked to speak on how we market and how we, the economic potential for these. I know there's a lot of economic potential. My husband and I have traveled and rode in 24 states, and we're not unusual. We run into people all the time. In fact, Randy Brown ran into a couple that was on the trail just a few days ago from Georgia. They're biking in all 50 states, and they chose to come to Marysville. Last week, there was a post on the National Rails to Trails Facebook page, and I'm going to read you just this little bit. The last few days, we rode the Chief Standing Bear Trail near Beatrice, Nebraska, and the Blue River Rail Trail near Marysville, Kansas. The trails meet at the state border. Great, great. They have pictures. It's wonderful. But the first comment was, so cool. How do you find the trailhead in Kansas? We have tried at least twice and couldn't find it in Marysville. Any additional directions are appreciated. Well, obviously I got on there and got them a map and links to our website and links to all the information. It's an eyesore, it's a safety issue, and it's hindering our potential at that economic development.
So our question is twofold. To apply for this grant, the city would have to be the official group to apply for it. We're willing to write the grant, and then we would like to know if the city would contribute matching funds toward this grant. These funds wouldn't be used in your current budget year, it would come later.
Have you talked to City Administrator Haberkamp about it? Is he aware of the whole process?
It was when we met with the mayor and the city administrator.
Okay, well,
we talked about this.
I wanted to make sure
Yes,
that we're all squared away since
Right.
he's not here to speak for
That's
himself.
right. Yep.
I do think it's great that there's 5,000 coming from the commissioners, since they obviously realize this is, I mean, Marysville benefits the most, but it's also in the county. This is very much a, you know, it's good for Oquito, it's good for Marietta for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I mean, it can be a draw for the entire, you know, area rather than just Marysville. And you said the Partnership for Growth has come forward with 10,000?
Yep.
Of that as well, so the ask would be 5,000 for our share of the 20% match, which would make us basically 5% of the total, so.
How many times have we paid for having a plan drawn for the 7th Street corridor? At least twice, I think.
Well, have we had one that was, we'll say, the entire thing? It feels like we've had plans, but one didn't include the drainage side.
Right.
Or one was like a pie in the sky, more of experimental.
A bit more hastily
Like,
done.
yeah,
It was just like,
so-
hey,
Well,
try to, like,
this-
I don't know about that, but I do know that we didn't like the last one that was done.
'Cause, yeah.
But to me, I mean, I love the trail, but we have to address the drainage problem we have down here and find a way to pay for that before we do anything.
I mean, that, when I met with the group, that was a real point that I made as well, and they understand, which is that it's more than just the
Pretty.
trail on the surface. I mean, we could make it more inexpensively, really pretty on the surface, but we're still gonna have flooding problems in businesses. We're still gonna have other associated, it's gotta be a holistic approach to fixing the issue. The issue is a lot of things, and that's why there's no point in making the surface nice if you don't fix the problems underneath. And this planning process would allow us to put that all together, all those pieces, and get that cost figured out and get a plan built at a pretty nominal cost to us.
Well, and at the same time, nominal to us, but we're getting some buy-in from the county.
Exactly.
Partnership for Growth. And I don't wanna leave that money on the table and say, no, we don't want
Right.
anything to do with that.
I mean, I appreciate that those entities have come forward even first before the council's been on board, since it needs to come through us. But I mean, to me, what we need more than anything is a plan that solves the different problems, so we're not just doing it last minute where we don't like the plan, and we're not doing it like so dreamy that it's a $3 million project that we can't afford. This is a way for us to do it in a kind of measured approach that will help solve the issues. That's the way I look at it.
What do you mean measured approach?
Well, we're not planning on trying to break ground. We're not planning for a grant beyond this planning grant, to do the project
So
next,
explain to me
6
what the
months.
planning grant's gonna give us.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Rob can
Rob?
speak to that more clearly.
I mean, it'll be a master plan. It'll look
Like
into
you've
the,
done what, twice before, 3 times before?
I don't think we've ever
think
had
it's done
anything
a
like
master
that. I
No,
think
we
we've
have.
asked for designs on 7th Street and that's about it. But I don't think it's entailing of what the other things that are out there.
Yeah, I don't
my
think we've
mind.
had a true master plan.
No.
We've had a plan for a grant that we needed to get in for right away, or we've had,
We
other
have a
plans.
whole big picture of what everything was gonna look like.
But not the drainage side and not how all
Correct,
that's tied
it's
in.
not, but
See,
that's
this
what I'm
would be
saying.
that. This would be all of it. This would be leaving no problematic stone unturned, as it were. This would be a way to explore all that in one master plan.
Okay, so who's gonna have final say on whether we use this plan or not?
Well, we would, it's our property. And ultimately, if this came up with a plan that we all believed was the right one, or a majority believed, and we had buy-in, then we could proceed with it. But I don't know what that plan looks like. That's why we have the grant to build the plan. It could be staged out over several years. It could be one big project. I mean, I'd love to have one big project and get it done, but that may not be realistic. But we need to find out what those costs are, what all it's gonna take to get there in order to build the plan.
well, and Colleen, I would think or hope that as part of this planning process, you would pull in the people in the community to see their needs and wants. I mean, they're your constituents. I would think
And we
that,
have done that in the past, had input from people in the city, and especially people down here. But when we saw the plan, it wasn't conducive to anybody's use down here in this area.
And I think that's kind of what Rob's saying, and that's probably why the process is so important, because you bring in the business owners, because it's the business owners here who are dealing with water issues right now anyway, and they have traffic needs to their businesses. I don't know that we've had, the Partnership for Growth hasn't been involved with the previous efforts. I don't think we've had the county directly involved. I mean, this is a little bit bigger coalition of, shareholders, I would say, than we've brought in before. But I know the depot's not here, but the depot obviously would really like to see something happen there. The trail would. You know, I know when the 7th Street South, the corridor was rehabbed, oh, was that 12 years ago now? 10, 12? Yeah, 12 years ago. There was, you know, some controversy surrounding that, and we had to make a lot of modifications. But the people I knew who were the most against the project then have kind of come around to understanding how that they've seen those benefits. So I look at this as the obvious counterpoint to that. We have to get there in a way that makes sure everybody's needs are being met, but that's the point of the planning process.
So if we go ahead with this, we get the plan, we don't like it, then what?
Well, I'd like to think we'll be part of that process.
Well, I know we will be,
Hopefully
but that's what I'm
We'll be shaping it to
saying.
something we will like. I mean, we may not love it,
But
but we
we've done
might
that
like it.
twice before.
I have a
I
question,
don't-
Rob. During this planning process, are they gonna come up with several different types of ideas and ways to make it look and feel a certain way, or is it just gonna be one, you know?
Oh, no, you
straight
typically
arrow?
would come up with, variations and then mix and match what you like and dislike and that sort of thing. Real quick too, Colleen, to what you're mentioning or talking about is, the last preliminary engineering report is what you're talking about. Part of it was that they didn't wanna look at the drainage directly as part of that. They were looking at just the road and the trail. And that was also a requirement based on a grant that you were looking at, where this isn't looking at, this is actually hoping to open up the door to all kinds of funding opportunities. That was specific to one direction that was being headed that way.
But we had a rendering that you guys had done with the streets and how, because I remember they were going like this and not,
That was that grant that Austin was trying to get in a hurry.
but that was.
That was.
we
Austin was
had
trying to get
that.
this grant in a hurry.
No.
Yeah, that's the one,
They-
that
okay.
the rest of us newer
We already
people,
had
that is the
those
last, that's
plans.
the only time we've seen a plan.
Though we'd already had those plans, and the UP Depot Preservation Society wanted to apply those for this grant. So those plans were brought out, but they had been done before that. They weren't done just for that grant. They were already done and brought out for that grant and used for that grant. But anyway,
But here's the thing, is those plans probably are something that this new process will look at and might use as a jumping off point, but I think this plan that hopes to be built here is going to be a lot more than just the grass and just the path. It's going to be, you know, the streets, it's going to be the drainage, it's gonna be the
because
whole
the drainage
package.
is a big
It
issue.
is, and it's gotta be solved first.
Yes, it's gotta be
So
solved
that's,
first.
I look at it as if maybe we've done some getting carts ahead of horses, to use that metaphor twice tonight. But that this will give us a chance to get the priority, like, well, we have to fix the drainage or this won't work. We have to do this won't work. I'd rather we do this now when we're not in a panic to apply for a grant
And that's
than
correct.
later. And when we've got the different groups on board and a kind of diverse group of people willing to kind of lend their time to it. I mean, it does have to go through us, but this isn't something that's just getting dumped on our administrator, which is fantastic as well.
So what's the time frame for payment?
26?
I don't think there's a time frame because it's a match money, and I don't think you'd have to worry about matching money if you don't get the
You have
grant.
to get the grant.
Okay.
You have to get the grant before
You're
you
just looking for a
match the money,
commitment
yeah.
Right.
Is it 25 or 24,000?
Would be,
No.
it'd be 25 budget, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that's
this
kind of
could
what
also-
I was wanting to know.
And this could also open up the possibility of getting, if the plan is correct, it could also open up the possibility of getting grants to complete the project, correct? Also create more funding so that's
Well,
not on a
This is
task.
like a prerequisite. This is getting our, ducks in a row, so we're
Like a
prepared
business
for
plan,
that, yeah.
Okay.
That's what we ran into the last time, is that we weren't shovel ready.
Right.
It had a lot to do with that fact.
But a lot of, the reason we couldn't even apply for that one grant was because it had to have something to do with the labor. You had to have so many jobs to,
Yeah.
That's right.
yeah.
So,
That was false information.
No, it wasn't. It was right in the grant. When we got the thing, we read it. Yeah.
Beg to disagree. I had conversations with Mayor Barnes and with City Administrator St. John about that, and I asked them to show me which page it was on. They couldn't find it.
Well, that's neither here nor there now. What would the council like to do?
I mean, we're not saying we have to give out the money, it's only if they get the grant. This has obviously been an issue for, I don't know how many years, I mean, I wasn't born here.
12 years.
I mean, it's obviously been an issue.
It'd been more than 12.
Well, the railroad went out 19 years ago, right? 05, is that right?
Yeah,
So,
because I know when we were planning that side, we had designs for that side, and, you know, it'd been nice if we could've just kept right on rolling up the street then, but money was a problem then too, so.
But bringing this could open up revenue, taxes, visitors, commerce. I mean, this one little thing could be the driving force to put Marysville on the map like it's never been before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many times I drive down the freeway and alls I see is cars loaded with bikes. I mean, it's getting very popular. I think it's an important thing to do, and I think we need to move forward with something. Just to keep putting it on the back burner, say not yet or not now, it definitely isn't the answer.
and really, this is a small buy-in. I mean,
Yeah, and I think on top of that, the safety side of it, I think KDOT would love for us to do something
they would.
on that street because they are not happy with
And if
the
we
safety
can-
aspect
The
of.
plan will hopefully help us, not only engender good feelings from them, but maybe get some money, because they like a finished project like everyone likes a finished project. And they've helped fund the tie-in, so it'd be ideally in 10 years from now, we can have that completed and feel the way we do about the south side of the, corridor. Like, wow, how did we not have this before?
Right, yeah,
So-
I agree.
And everyone's right, when you're down here, I've met people up here, even in the garbage truck early in the morning. How do you get to the trail from here? Go over there and catch that little street there and ride up there and shoot down. So it's, it is hard to find, it's terribly hard to find if you don't know where you're going, so.
I move to approve the request for the planning grant, $5,000 match contingent upon being awarded the grant.
Second.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Next, we have the Black Squirrel Bark Park.
My name's Maggie Lord. I'm here with a couple other committee members, Maureen Christ and Deb Hawkinson. I think you all received our packet. We are here tonight to request permission to add 2 shelters on concrete pads to the dog park. We'd also like to replace the 2 trees that are dead, one inside the park and one in the parking lot. We'd like to install 3 new waste stations to help with the trash. And another request a lot of our park users have had is for a walking trail in the park. And since we think we have the funds to do so, we'd like to request permission to build a trail using millings so people can walk while their dogs play.
I would say no on the millings, and unless you're gonna put up some fancy deal to keep them in, because there are chunks of millings all over the place out there that our guys are hitting with their lawnmowers. I know around the benches, there's some pretty good chunks and stuff, and I've been down there before with my dog, and people pick them up and throw them. So, yes. So then they end up in the yard out there, and, the grass gets yay tall, and the guys run over them, and, it's hard on lawnmower blades and stuff, so.
I presume the millings is a more economical choice than like decomposed granite or some other type of walking trail surface.
It is.
A stone of some sort, or a crushed stone, what do they call it?
Like the limestone screenings that we use on the trail?
Trail.
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that, but.
I have a question, because wasn't there a compliance issue with our levy inspection?
With Corps of Engineers.
There's-
Yeah, and I'd like to know their parameters of what they set as a suggestion, or what would
So I made
potentially
some,
dock us.
I talked to City Administrator Haberkamp, quite a bit about it, and also talked to some people at the Corps, and did as much research as I could on the internet. The issue, I think the crux of their concern is about the water's ability to move and water's ability to absorb. So basically, they don't want things that are gonna catch lots of debris, ideally, and they don't want things that are gonna keep water from soaking into the ground. So they basically, it's all about,
Yeah.
water being able to use.
Yeah.
That being said, the Corps can recommend things and they can not like things, but they really don't have the power to do anything about it. The absolute worst thing they could do would be theoretically to kick us out of the program, but they don't have a history of doing that. But in extreme situations where, like if we went out and just started cutting holes in the levee or something, okay, yeah, they're gonna kick us out. They don't like it, but they ultimately know that it's our decision.
Okay. And I think
But
Josh made that
I
point
think
during that they're not
we
gonna-
need to get the official report from the Corps of Engineers from when they were here for the inspections before we decide on anything else.
As far as, I mean,
We got an official report, Cindy?
They won't give us that till fall?
yeah, so
So,
So it was just a conversation that we had with them.
the inspectors were here.
They specifically
And
said
possibly
that-
made some assumptions
Yeah.
off of what they said, okay?
right.
Can I
know
ask
they
another
said
question?
No new
Is,
trees, but the trees that were
The
there
trees that
could
are already
stay.
there, well, yeah, or you can,
Placing trees, I don't see that as.
that, I mean, it's our
They said the
ultimate.
trees had to come out.
Well, no, they
No.
can't, see, that's the thing is they can't tell us to do anything.
Okay, so if we get kicked out of the program, what do we lose?
Well, see, so I don't think they're gonna kick us out of the program.
But they can, and we lose CBDG funding availability, correct?
I don't know that that's true, but I also do not believe that they would kick us out of the program. There are other places in very similar situations that have gone a lot further than we have, and they've not had an issue.
is this the first time they've ever inspected?
I do not
Since
know.
the dog park's been
I do
here.
not know yet that they've had any comments on it heretofore. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's
So
kind of,
do you have like rules and regulations? Can you show us the chapter and verse where it says what the regulations are for that
I
area?
believe they have all that, but they don't
Yeah.
publish
They don't
anything in
publish any
particular.
of that.
Okay,
couldn't find
this,
it, in
this
other
piece of
words.
property is the piece of property that the city council gave us to build a dog park under the understanding, or our understanding, that it would be a legitimate dog park.
Right.
Kevin has said since day one,
I don't think it's in the flood area holding pond.
right.
But the levee changed that whole area from being a
The
floodplain.
holding pond is inside of the levee, so when we get abundance of rain and the levee gates are shut, we can hold water inside because it won't go outside. It's designed to fill up down by my house and then fill around, and it keeps filling all those areas clear around over on the South 15th.
Yeah. It's
And
so,
when it gets full, then they can pump it over the levee across the railroad tracks.
Is there a public safety issue?
If it rains, if it floods, yes, there is.
if it's,
And the levee is like a 100-year flood levee or something like that?
50-year.
but this is supposed to be like, yeah, part of the system of so that way we can, if there's a flood outside, but it's raining inside the levee probably as well, so you can have the levee shut, the gates shut, and the flood waters can't get in, but you still have somewhere for the water that's inside to go.
My first contact with the city about the dog park was in 2018. That's a long time ago. And this is the first time anybody's told me.
So,
And the city even planted trees down, or a
One
tree.
tree.
A tree.
One
One
tree.
tree that's dead. I mean, we were given this job and tasked to build the dog park and raised, as you can see, $88,000 to build this dog park with money from donors in our community. I think we have done an exceptional job, and I don't understand how it feels like the rules are changing. Nobody gave us these rules, and why not? I
So-
mean,
I guess here's gonna be my recap of how we got here. So I think it's a little bit to do with us not necessarily understanding what the rules are, and I don't think anybody's got a super firm grasp on that, because you even talk to two different people at the Corps, you get a lot of kind of interpretation response. I think that previous administration probably wasn't concerned, and we take the council, as a former council person, take a lot of direction from the people who are doing the talking for our behalf aren't concerned, then we aren't concerned. So mea culpa on that. But also, from the conversations I've had, there's, like I said, there's the two things that they'd be concerned about, movement of water and water absorption. I feel like outside the levee, they're more worried about water movement. Inside the levee, it's more about absorption, because that's the crux of it is the reason there's a ponding area is to hold the water. And that water, it can't go anywhere because it ponds there so it doesn't go outside the levee, but it's got to be able to absorb. So as long as you're not going to build structures or things that won't, or you're not going to pave the whole surface so the water can't absorb, then they're really not that worried about it. If we were looking to put in a parking lot there, that would be a problem.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Yeah.
just ask a question?
Sure.
So when you guys are doing your research, so we're talking about basically backup water. We're not talking about water that's flowing. So usually on the FEMA side, when you're dealing with those type of situations, you're looking at structures or something that's going to displace water.
Right.
That's going to take away your holding, like a chain link fence or something that has no area to it is not displacing water that is keeping you from backing water that you need to back up. So as you research, you might just think of it more in that terms.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because even like a pavement wouldn't keep them from holding water.
True. So,
But it makes,
So I know what-
the pavement takes solubility out of the soil.
That's true. I just know that there's been fill permits that we've had to do that if you're gonna bring in dirt to fill and displace, you have to calculate, based on that fill permit, are you displacing so much water or are you, the water's not flowing in that area, is that right?
It should just be backflow
It's
water.
just backflow.
Just allowing the city to hold enough water, so.
Water.
So you might just, when you're researching that, think in those terms or look at that.
and it's easy to convolute it with the buyout lots, which are a different scheme.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because that a little bit too is about, they won't let you build a chain link fence or
Nothing.
even poles.
You're
but
not
nothing-
supposed to
nothing.
park on a FEMA lot.
Yeah.
Within lies another problem.
So anyway, just something to, as you think about that.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Okay.
How big are the
It is.
concrete pads gonna be for the structures, do you guys know?
The pads are there.
11 by 13.
Sorry?
I think they're 11 by 13. That's what it
Yeah.
says in there.
Yeah.
One of them is already there. It needs to be enlarged, by a foot maybe. And the one on the small dog side has not been put in yet.
So Cindy, you said that there's a problem with the parking lot because it is a FEMA lot?
So,
And that was not brought to anyone's attention from the previous.
is the entirety of the parking lot a FEMA lot? Because there's a water, I wondered if there's not some right of way in there because there's a water access spot.
Anyway, maybe they'll never come and check it. Maybe nobody be parked there when the FEMA guy comes to check, because he does come.
Maybe it's being temporary.
I
by
think,
its
I think
nature.
first off, that we don't need to be making assumptions and interjecting opinions to the council or the public. We probably need to reach out to somebody other than the local FEMA person, the Corps. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we need to go to Senator Moran or somebody, because there's a lot of lots in town, a couple of which needed mowed that the city owned that were in very bad disrepair. And just put this thing to bed, because all I've heard is, well, the Corps tells us to do this, FEMA tells us to do this. Well, you gotta start asking the right questions. They changed the floodplain in 2015, 2016 is when they came out and.
By tension?
Yes.
All right, yeah.
And that changed a lot of things, not just at Tension, but down on the southwest side of town. So we need to quit just talking about assumptions that we think are the truth and move on from there, so.
So you mean FEMA lots? The assumption for FEMA lots?
Well, yeah, yes.
You cannot build on a FEMA lot.
Well, you gotta go to somebody and talk to them about it,
And
so.
it has been.
We'll move,
That's a little bit different problem than the
Right.
one. in-
well, but
I agree with you.
the same thing down here at the dog park, they're not gonna displace that much space for drainage.
I will also say that Beatrice Dog Park is in the floodplain, and they're building a shelter.
Yeah.
They had to complete a no-rise letter, and they're gonna build
They've got
it.
giant oak trees, but,
And they've got massive trees.
yeah.
It's probably just some paperwork, but like you said, no sooner, we need to find out what we need to do.
I mean, I'm all for making these changes, and
For sure.
I just wanna make sure we're doing our due diligence, cause it was brought up
Table.
last time
Right,
too,
yeah.
hey, what are we gonna
We meet in 2
be
weeks.
penalized or not, you know, so that's,
And I do agree with Kevin on what kind of surface you're gonna put down for the walking path.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be.
And I do believe that Mr. Haverkamp said we weren't gonna be dinged.
Yeah, he did.
and
He
that's,
did.
he did, and that's.
And that's basically what I heard as well. They're
Yeah,
like,
same.
there's a certain amount of they can make you do things, then there's things that are basically abdicated to cities and they have recommendations. Like, they don't like it, but they can't really make you do anything and they can't really ding you for it.
Right,
They can't deduct points for it.
right.
I just wanna remind you, $88,000 was donated to the dog park. Those people donated their money in good faith that we were gonna do what we said we were gonna do, you guys were gonna do what you okayed, and I'd like to get past this, and
But did we ever okay shelters?
They're asking now.
I know.
It was talked about, I mean, we talked about, it was,
This first, I never have ever heard
It was,
shelters.
yeah, it was.
No,
that
no,
was
no,
your-
no, we did bring it to the council.
Yep.
I did not know that an official vote was not taken, but it was discussed.
It was discussed that it was something that you were working on.
Right.
But yeah, we voted on a couple other items on that agenda, but not specifically shelters.
I can't see this, in my opinion, being an issue, being the dog park's already there, all this stuff's already there. The Corps of Engineers were just out here and they said, it may not be the best thing in the world, but it's not that big of a deal, nothing's gonna happen type of thing. I think what, Kyle's saying, let us just check for sure, find out what we need to do, and then we can come back and revisit it and see what the next steps is.
Okay, so tell us what our next step is. I want to have this perfectly clear what you expect of us at this point.
Well, I would say, don't put anything up yet. Let us do that check. Give us, I don't know, one meeting might be pretty fast,
Right.
because
I'd say 30 to 60 days, we
you
ought
can
to
give
have
us till
something.
the first meeting in June.
Yeah, probably, June.
No, that's 2 meetings,
Second.
but to make sure everyone's concerns are ameliorated and we have whatever we need to in writing from the Corps, I would say hold tight if you can come back on the first meeting in June and expect us to make some motions and decisions at that time.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies, appreciate it.
Okay, next, I'm bringing something up, which I don't plan on making a habit of, but, there's been some issues, and I've talked to the PD a little bit about alleys in town, and there's obviously been a lot of work being done in alleys here of late with the gas company and otherwise doing work, just kind of construction season in Marysville. But as it's written in the standard traffic ordinance, in the STO that the local PD uses, and that we've adopted, the section 92 is what it comes to as parking in the alley. It's within the purview of the city to modify, opt in, opt out of anything in the standard traffic ordinance. It's not fun reading, but it's very interesting reading. You start thumbing through it. There's a lot of violations in the wind that are just kind of, they just are what they are. I mean, the PD doesn't go around looking for these things in general. It's mostly complaint driven because they would be busy all the time on lots of infractions, parking distances from corners, parking distances from sidewalks and alleys and trailer rule. It's a big pile of rules. But the reason I'm bringing this up, and it's a little bit self-interested, full disclosure, I live on an alley, but there are a lot of people who don't have parking except off of alleys, or they live in areas where there's no street parking, or there's no public parking. My neighborhood is a pretty good example. I hear it from my neighbors. All you have to do is drive down a couple alleys in town, and you'll see a lot of vehicles that are in technical violation, because by the letter of the law, they can't have one wheel in the alley. They can't overhang the alley. By the letter of the law, it's pretty difficult for some people to I don't know, basically live regular productive lives because they'd have to park blocks from their house. And that's just not great. The way that we've operated in my neighborhood generally has been do not obstruct the alley, make sure there's room for the UPS truck and the trash truck and the other, companies that need to service it. It is a business part of town. And in more residential areas of town, you're not gonna see as much of it. But what I'd like to see is us adopt something that more matches with the reality of how people live, I guess I would say. To me, it's like, it's not a rule that needs to be used as a cudgel, so much as how can we make this honor the idea of the rule as far as making sure there's not obstructions and that businesses have access and residents have access without making it, toothless entirely. So I don't know if you saw, my hand scratch in the agenda. I didn't know, I kind of took it to Josh to talk to him about it. I didn't know he was actually gonna put it in the agenda, so. But basically what I'd like to see is it to be changed from park any vehicle, since that would imply anybody having a wheel in an alley, or, by the letter of the law, it's extremely tight, to obstruct. And the language in here is just me spitballing. And then change it to kind of make sure that basically there's a travel width based on the Uniform Development Code. I believe it's 12 feet is the minimum for an alley. So I thought, well, you could easily write in there that no more than 12 feet has to be maintained at all times, because then you're basically maintaining an alley width by the development code at all times. So, go ahead.
I just remember when we owned the motel,
Yeah.
they used to try to give tickets to our people that lived on the backside of the motel for obstructing a fire lane. But ours was not actually an alley, it was a private drive.
That's right.
So several times the police department had to rescind those tickets because of that. But, so are you gonna get in any trouble for impeding a fire lane if you change this ordinance, even though you're trying to leave it at 12?
It's interesting because there's no language in here about fire lane.
No, there is no language.
I guess, yeah, I read the whole section because I thought, well, what else could kind of, like you said, that unintended consequences, and I couldn't find anything about fire lane. So, I don't know if, we don't really have anybody here to speak for the fire, but
Yeah.
8.5 feet is the max legal width for a road vehicle. And I don't
Even a
think the
fire
fire,
truck?
I don't think a fire truck's any wider than that, unless
I don't
it's.
have a
I
clue.
don't know. We've got a trailer a couple of weeks ago with temps going down an alley. Cause they got them sitting side by side, just kinda
Oh,
tongue to this and
Do you know
tail
how-
to this one. And,
how narrow was it?
well,
Could-
he couldn't get between them both.
So narrower than 12
Narrower than
feet.
12, yeah.
Yeah.
And see, that's to me, that's why 12 feet, because it's in the code, and because 12 feet, I guess you could say more than 12 feet, but 12 feet gives you, 3.5 feet of clearance, so that's more than 1.5 feet on each side. And, quite frankly, as somebody who's driven a lot of trucks and trailers, if you can't fit in that gap, maybe you shouldn't be driving a trailer.
And, it makes a lot of sense, especially around the schools. A lot of these schools, you can't park in the street.
And I went and kind of pulled my neighborhood, because you go look down that alley, stand in that alley, you can see about 5 or 6 vehicles that are all technically in violation. And it's never blocked,
It's never obstructed.
but they have nowhere else to go. There's no parking in that area. Trust me, I know.
I think you can't park in front of your place.
And we don't want people parking in their yards either.
Right.
We've had that conversation.
And so you've talked to the police department about this, and they're in agreement with it?
They said it's ultimately the council's decision, but that as long as you aren't impeding it, as in not allowing vehicles to go through, it doesn't seem like there's a concern. And that's me too, because I wouldn't want to do that either.
But it makes sense, if you're still allowing the minimum width for an alley, which is 12 feet. So if that alley is only 12 feet and your car has to cover that, well, then you're still not within
And
compliance. But I don't know if
I
there's
wouldn't
any
think
alley in town that's like that.
No, I think most of the, yes.
Oh, I was just saying, leaving it as 12 feet unobstructed, we're still going by the regulations of the minimum width for an alley. So I
So-
mean, it makes sense to me.
You
who-
said, go ahead.
Who's responsible for that 12 feet? The guy on the north side or the south side?
I don't think it.
What do you mean if
really
there's two
matters.
people?
If there's two people,
Well, whoever's there first,
yeah.
then the next person is the one who's
Well-
impeding it.
Yeah.
Do they have to move every 24 hours still?
Well, I don't know.
So if the,
If it's,
No, it's, that alley's considered
Yeah.
a street.
if an alley's
Well-
12 foot wide, is that what an alley is?
That's the
by-
minimum width
yeah,
it
the
can
minimum
be
width is
to
a 12
be
foot,
an
yeah,
alley.
yeah.
So,
But most of these alleys are actually wider than that.
Yeah, they're like
I didn't measure all of them.
A lot of them are skinny.
Yeah, the residential ones tend to be narrower. The ones
Right.
in the business part of town tend to be
Right.
wider because they're specifically built to have vehicles parked in them sometimes.
or, yeah, big trucks
Yeah, like, well, yeah.
delivering.
right.
Like the 14 delivery trucks at Dollar General every day, the bread truck district.
Yeah.
have you talked to the city attorney about this? Yeah.
I haven't.
I think you
did
should
briefly.
before we make any
I
kind of
said- I said I may have something to discuss with you after the meeting, because I knew he wasn't gonna be here. I ran
Yeah.
into him today. And he's like, yeah, you know, there'd have to be research. It would have to be something where an ordinance would have to be drafted.
Right.
And he would have to, like, weigh in on whether it's in conflict and what it would supersede.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does amending the standard traffic ordinance require any public hearing or comment period? Is it different
I don't-
than regular ordinance?
I don't think so. I would confirm that with the attorney as well, but I don't believe so. So anyway.
So I guess that would be the thing is what he says, you know, what the attorney says.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and, I mean, I don't wanna, I'm never gonna charge our city attorney with researching things without the council's consent to do that, because I think it'd be too easy for me or another mayor in 10 years to hang a bunch of legal fees on the city on a fool's errand. So I wanna make sure that if the council's okay with having him look at that and see what was required, you know, how that would play in, I'm fine with that.
Do we need a motion to do that?
No,
We can just refer it,
I
if
just-
if there's a
I just-
consensus to let the city attorney look at it.
Further
I'll-
That's a
to the
good
city.
idea to help
Okay.
out already.
Yep.
All right. Next up, we have the RFP for the commercial properties. So there's been a lot of discussion around these, of course, and I wasn't able to be at the meeting with the developers 2 weeks ago. But I did watch the video later, so I feel like I saw a lot of the conversation that was there. I guess we need to probably get next steps here, whether that's picking our pony, or whether that's asking more questions. I don't want to leave any of the developers in the wind any longer than we need to. Obviously, they've got interest. We don't want to drag it out any more than we have to.
Excitement dies out.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if anybody's had any epiphanies or any more thoughts or questions or concerns about any of the specific proposals or kind of the direction that we'd like to go in.
Officially, no,
I have not
right?
seen it in
You
writing.
haven't seen it in writing yet?
No.
Okay.
I would assume that all developers are still in the mix until they've put it in writing that they're out, so they can all be discussed. Obviously, there's a couple different ideas. Hers was the most different of the ideas, I would say. The other two were, I'd say, more similar. I think from my perspective, a big part of it is how does this play into other development, whether that's downtown or in general. I like to think of this as more than just us solving a problem and doing good by those buildings, but also doing kind of a broader good. So, I don't know, does anybody have any kind of thoughts, or what's your takeaway? What are you leaning towards? are you liking the idea of a sale versus lease? Are you thinking this isn't enough money?
I would rather see it sold than leased.
Okay,
I'm like them, I'd rather see it sold than leased. I'm still not impressed with how they're solving the parking around there.
okay. Well, I know part of the idea with a lease, I think that, I'm not just trying to play devil's advocate, but part of the idea with a lease is you could have some sort of ongoing funding mechanism. Now, there would be an administrative mechanism there too. That's, I think, a lot of the downside. from talking to the city administrator and others, is that you have to kind of sort that out. But that doesn't mean there's not something to be said for it. I can say too, from my personal opinion, I don't love the idea of selling it for $1. I mean, I like the idea of it being productive and good, but I don't think we need to give it away.
And the only thing too about a lease, is at least what my thoughts were, if we sell it, that's it. That's, no more. With a lease, if this whole idea flops and nothing happens, then what? You know what I mean? At least with a lease, we would have some semblance of power to, move it in a different direction.
Well, Todd alluded to it. If we could get a funding mechanism through a lease that would help support the museum, because ultimately at the end of the day, we want to get rid of the commercial property in the restaurant, but the museum, until the foundation takes it over, it's going to be there, but we still need to help support that.
100%.
It's part of the city.
Yep.
The nice thing about the lease is if we write it the right way, one, we can write it so they assume 100% liability for property taxes and 100% liability for insurance. But yet we don't say, oh, we're going to sell it to you for $1 or $10,000, and then you turn it into a 5-year project and get nowhere with it.
Right, exactly.
I mean, at that point, they have skin in the game because, they have a payment to pay us for a lease. And I do like the idea that if whoever it was goes defunct, in the lease, you could write into the contract that if you go defunct, no, it comes back to the city, and then we find another property manager. From my research, properties that get rehabilitated on a lease, if somebody's going to go defunct on it, they have very good property value to other developers or other property managers that want to take care of it. So that's...
Then I guess I would like to see an example of a contract for a lease, so we know what we're dealing with as a lease versus a sale.
I think that's our due diligence to negotiate that lease via our city attorney, admin and finance. I mean, every one of those leases are going to be different. The terms of those leases, we can't go off just a standard cookie cutter sheet type of lease. And that's where I'm not in favor of selling it for $1. I'm not in favor of selling it for $10,000 because we still don't shield ourselves against what they could decide to do with it.
Right.
It's of my opinion, because of the relationship that we've had over the last year and a half with Tyler and Frontier Property Management, Brenda Spencer, that's the direction I feel we should go with this whole project.
And so does Tyler, he never said, the other one said he wanted to buy it for $1. Has Tyler ever said anything?
My conversations with Tyler is that he could be amenable to either of those options, but it would be a conversation for that engagement period. And
Actually, I did write this down, no preference on lease agreement or outright sale. Tyler will do either one.
And
Why I took notes.
when Jeff and I toured his projects in Wamego and Manhattan, that was kind of, and his phrasing was engagement, and it fits perfectly, as in, if we were to proceed with him and his group, that would be when we would draft what it would look like and make that final decision, whether it was a sale or a lease. If we want to maintain those decisions, that is the path that we need to go, because I do not believe either one of the other developers are interested in a lease. So, obviously that plays into it, because that gives us that ability to do that due diligence
And decide.
through an engagement period.
Well, and just responding to the RFP, just because we pick one of these entities doesn't mean that that's the final thing.
No.
It's that negotiating process at the end that says, okay, we're comfortable with you. You said you wanted 12 to 15. We want to limit you to 10. This is where we want to be at as far as apartments go. You want to do certain things. We agree with that. But it's not until that final negotiating process is done that we're actually engaged in a contract. We're not engaging in a contract here, we're just engaging in somebody to do that due diligence that we don't have the time to do and don't have the resources to do, to turn it into a nice property in town.
And before it was finalized, we would have renderings and we would have everything we would want to see
Yeah, 100%.
in place, so that way we'd know what we were getting. I mean, there's of course a little bit of subject to change in that, because construction projects,
Opens up
require
things that
that,
don't,
yeah.
yeah.
But we would have a really good idea before we finalized and signed off on the property changing hands.
And I agree with Jeff about Tyler. I was always impressed with Tyler. I was impressed with Brenda, that he brought her with him. She came with him that night. We have a relationship. She seemed very knowledgeable the day that we showed them through the buildings.
They have a good rapport.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they work very well together.
Okay. Other people have kind of opinions on the developers that they thought maybe that would be the path we need to move forward on. I mean, I've not met the third developer in person, but I have met Deanna, thank you. Name was escaping me. But I have, spent some time with GW and Tyler, and I can say I think both of them are earnest and knowledgeable and people that could do a good job. I could really make arguments going either way.
Sure.
Quite frankly, I think that each of them kind of brings something a little different to the table. I like that rapport that Tyler has with the State Historical Preservation Office. He obviously knows what he's doing. He's very close by. He doesn't feel like it's a proximity issue.
Right.
I know GW felt like it was more of a stretch, but on the other hand, also I know he saw Keystone Edition, and we talked about other places in town that need developed, and he saw that side of things, whereas I don't think that's so much Tyler's wheelhouse. That's not to say that it needs to be. We could look at that as another problem in a different project.
I think all of the developers were interested in
But
other spots as
they all
well.
understand, they understand that the whole town, there's a lot of pieces that they could be involved in to improve, their own business prospects as well as the community.
My thing with Tyler is he seemed the most flexible of them. He was more, whichever way you guys think is best, I'm willing to go that way, The others kind of had a more concrete, definite position that they wanted to go.
I think some of them wanted to talk more the day they were here, but I think with
having the
other two
yeah.
in there, they weren't gonna, so I think if we wanna choose one or two of them, bring them in and go this one at this time, this one at that time, and talk to them.
I would honestly, what I'd like to do is make a motion to move forward with our Frontier Property Management and accept their RFP proposal, and then go into negotiations with them for I prefer a lease or purchase agreement. I think that's something that the city administrator, council, and our council, being the city attorney, and then the admin and finance committee should be involved in, and then present a proposal to the city council. Sorry, kind of a long motion.
Or you seconded
I'll second it,
Okay?
after he repeats it all over again.
No, I'm not gonna do it again.
Word for word, or it doesn't count. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we, as the city, enter into negotiations with Frontier Property Management in regards to the business block portion of the Kester block. Is there any further discussion?
The sooner we get this going, the sooner we can see progress.
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And I or somebody will reach out to the other developers and kind of, explain the situation as well. Okay. Next up, we have the RFP for the Kester Restaurant, which doesn't exist yet. So,
How did that?
but now that we got one tied off, let's move on to the next one. So I'm bringing this one forward because there's been someone who's not wishing to go public on it, at the moment, but you just have to take my word for it. This is not a fly-by-night discussion, but interested in possibly purchasing the restaurant to reopen it and do light renovations, as in they understand there would be rules, historic preservation rules about what they could and couldn't do. And frankly, they're interested in it because of they could control, and they can get some of the same possibly grant opportunities and things through that as well. So, but they'd be interested potentially in opening as a restaurant, including the basement, as a kind of a semi-separate business. But I explained to them that it's probably something we're gonna need to do another RFP for. I think Tyler kind of sounded like he was somewhat interested in the house side of it. I mean, if this is something where we want that to be part, if you're decided you want that to be part of the discussions on the business block portion, then we can push this back. But if you feel like this is a separate part of the property that Tyler's kind of take it or leave it at this point, I don't think, from talking to Tyler, he would be all that concerned if we did this.
I'd keep it separate.
Yeah. But I think it's great that, just like when we had someone come forward on the business block, somebody coming to us and saying, hey, this is fallow, we want to do something good with it. As you can see from our finances, the restaurant having been vacant for 14, 16 months, how long has it been? It's been a bit. It's costing us a lot of money that we're not able to recoup when we have to keep track of maintenance and otherwise. It's obviously got a lot of potential, but it'd be better for Marysville and that block if there were a restaurant or a business in there, bringing people and creating sales tax and everything else. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at having City Administrator Haverkamp, or in conjunction with Admin and Finance or myself or whomever, draft an RFP somewhat similar to what we did for the business portion of the block, and get it prepared to publish and to go out and seek RFPs for the house. And it could be the same thing where we're talking lease or we're talking sale, but we basically want to put a lot of strictures on it, either way.
That was gonna be my question, is do you know if they are leaning towards a lease or?
They want to purchase it. They look at the amount of money they want to put into it, they would be nervous of putting into it in a lease. That doesn't mean it's impossible. They didn't outright say no, but they're very interested in purchasing. And honestly, if it's structured correctly in a way that, preserves it and benefits the Kester House Museum, I mean, I look at it like it's they're talking breakfast lunch place, a place that some people are gonna buy their, take out and go and sit in the gardens and then have a coffee or things. I mean, I see this as a very cohesive possibility for the betterment of the block.
Hopefully they do something at night in the gardens.
Well, there's some talk about maybe there being some more nightlife in the old Oak Door Lounge, for those that remember that, which is very cool.
I gotta tell you, that place is prime for nightlife activity. If somebody did something.
It has been.
Pretty good.
It has been.
Well then, so I guess I'd like, if the council's okay with us moving, I don't know if we need a motion or just consensus.
I'll make a motion to do an RFP for the Kester House restaurant property.
Okay, so moved and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and we'll of course bring that back once that's kind of drafted and put together, and we can chew it over before we publish it, so. Exciting times. It's good to see a little momentum. Okay, next up we have economic development for 209 North 2nd.
Move to approve economic development, 209 North 2nd.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Then we have an economic development request for 301 North 2nd.
Move to approve economic development request, 301 North 2nd.
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, I have no notices or hearings. We have the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to
Yes.
to remove the first payment request because we did that before. It's just that it never got paid yet from KDHE because the contractor hadn't provided something. So we only need to do the second one.
Oh, so we need to remove item 1.
Item 1, yes, please.
I'll amend my motion to remove item 1 from the consent agenda and approve the rest of the items.
Second, it's good with that.
Okay. Now it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have the presentation of appropriations ordinance number 3822.
Move to approve appropriation ordinance 3822, amount of $398,491.73.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Roll call.
Snellings,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Barons,
Yes.
Keating,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Crom,
Yes.
Racky,
Yes.
7-0.
Okay, thank you. Next we have city administrator report. Did Josh give you anything he would like reported?
He did. The city employees as a group work on safety. And so we did receive the gold award again. So we have a 5% reduction in our work comp premium. I know that we had a call, the dock floated away. So we will work on the dock when we can, but it will take a diver because the eye bolts into the concrete. And we can't get to the concrete without a diver, so.
Said it has anchors too, that were.
Well, anyway, so it's gonna be a bit before we can fix that, but we are aware of it. You noticed that they moved the manholes to 11th Street now, so that's kinda tied up Dollar General a little bit. We did make calls and then to their corporate, because they asked us to
their
call
parking,
corporate
yeah.
because their semis can't get in.
Yeah.
So that's gonna affect them through the Memorial Weekend most likely. So that was an issue for that. But we wanted to commend Matt Simpson, that he completed the Homeland Security training that he went to in Georgia. And then also Fernando Salcedo, who did his first round on FBI LEADA in supervisor leadership. Good. Well, I think that's all he told me.
If you think of something later,
Oh.
you can bring it up.
No, one more
Okay.
thing. We found a flush tank that we didn't know existed. Again. Because of a backup, whatever. Anyway, we came and had it cleaned out because we had to do that. But now we have another flush tank to take a bid on. We've got one quote, but we do have another company that does them for us. So the first one was more than $10,000. So I'll leave it at that so that we can get the second bid that we'll have to bring back to you so we can have that done before we do cured in place, just so you're aware.
I'm new here, what's a flush tank?
Well,
You,
from what I understand, it's the way they used to be able to, like in place of a manhole, they remove the flush tank and put a manhole there. So it serves that same purpose, but you can't.
like heavy flood,
Yeah.
dump water and just
To
quick flush it
clean
out
out the
with like a
the
valve.
sewer. Yeah,
But it's old technology.
yeah, right. And then they can't do the lining, the CIPP, until we get rid of them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, once again.
Is this the last
Darn it.
one?
Keep finding them.
I think that was what they told us several times ago, but.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
keep finding them here and there.
Found plenty.
That's all I remember for right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have standing committee reports. I believe Admin and Finance was the only standing committee that met. Before we go into that, something I've been talking to Josh Haverkamp about a little bit is getting on more of a schedule with getting our committees to meet. It feels like there's always something that committees can meet. So if we could work on trying to get, even if it's not monthly, even if it's every other month, having a committee meeting, whether that's on even months or odd months or whatever, trying to get where we do it more regularly so that more of the work is getting done, and we probably are gonna see more projects and think, hopefully less will sneak up on us. Something else we'll probably do is each committee will have a chair, because as it is now, there's no committee chairs, and then that person will be more charged with making sure that the committee does actually meet, and kind of reporting back, that sort of thing. But we'll spread it out so that it's not one or two people being chairs for everything. Don't worry about that. But that's in the works. I just wanted you to be aware. But the Admin and Finance Committee did meet and discuss the Kester House Museum finance with the situation with the curator position, as well as the some of the expenses writ large the shortfalls we've seen with the block. I don't know, Colleen, you probably want to speak to that?
My suggestion was that we take the money out of convention and tourism, the $5,000 that Karen so eloquently said we agreed to pay, plus out of convention and tourism, we take the additional funds for the curator, the additional funds to pay the expenses for the museum, like the internet, the security system, the electrical, for the year, but with the understanding that when tourism starts in 2025, like April of 2025, we turn the museum over to the foundation and they will be responsible after that.
So there's, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it doesn't have to be separate, but there's really the immediate problem and there's the long-term problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the immediate problem is we are short. We don't have the position fully funded, and our expenses have outstripped our income on the block as far as taxes and insurance and internet and security and otherwise. So we've got to make up the shortfall to square things in the short term and to keep the museum open to the public and everything basically, status quo. But of course, especially now that we're moving forward on the RFP on the business block, our incomes aren't going to improve. They're going to decline because we're going to have potentially also the restaurant out of our hands in X many months. So we will not have income from these. Now, we won't have the connected expenses as well, but for the museum to be able to have funding beyond that point, that's the thing we've got to figure out, because we aren't going to be able to do it unless we're just pulling it from somewhere completely separate. So what we want to do is start having the conversation with the Museum Foundation Board and the interested parties connected to that. How do we get to the point where we can transition the ownership into nonprofit hands, out of the city's hands, into an entity's hands, so that can hopefully get more funding opportunities, because being a nonprofit, not being municipally owned, will hopefully enable that. But also they've shown great success in raising funds to improve and benefit the property. That's why it's so beautiful. It's not because we've poured all the money into it. It's because they've done a lot of work. So I believe they can do this. Now, whether that's the Museum Foundation Board as it is now, or it needs to be restructured, or if a new entity kind of adjacent needs to be created, we have to figure out what that looks like. But that's, I think, the road we need to get on now. And setting a deadline sets that pretty hard. That's why I've got a certain amount of apprehension about that. I think we need to have as much flexibility as possible in how we get there, but we need to do it in an extremely planned out, measured approach. I don't think it can be 6 months. A year feels aggressive to me because of the way these things work.
Because I originally said January 1st, and I thought we kind of compromised till April.
Because it's more of a year.
Yeah.
It's 11 months.
And I think too, I mean, we say we're not gonna have the income coming in from the commercial or the restaurant. Well, we have no income coming in from the restaurant.
Correct.
The income coming in from the commercial side is next to minimal. But you have the delta of insurance and property taxes and maintenance
That's gonna
going away. So, I agree that it should be until April
Of 2025.
April of 2025 before we lock into any kind of agreement. And at the same time, I also agree that we need to support the the Kester House Museum for 2024? As far as the, is it 5,000 out of convention?
5,000 plus 4, right?
For the salary,
Nine, and
but
then what
there's,
was our,
What I
Shortfall. What was our
suggested,
short-
18,000's a
18,000.
shortfall on insurance plus
There you go.
whatever the expenses are monthly for the security. I know their quarterly is due again, which is $250, and the internet's like $60 a month, and whatever the electricity will be, and whatever.
and
I
so
mean, I
my
can't
suggestion
really
was
come up
taking
with that.
all those expenses out of convention and tourism to keep the museum going
right.
and the
We're-
city paying those bills for this year until 2025.
Because we can't really, if we want the museum to be open, and we
Which
want,
we do.
and we want the security, and we want the internet, I mean, we have to bite the bullet and pay for it from somewhere, so that would get us through the interim.
Have we talked to Convention and Tourism to see if they're on board? I
Not,
know it's ultimately
not
our
officially,
decision,
not in
but-
any official capacity, no. And that was something that came up at the meeting too, is I'm like, obviously, we control the purse strings, but
Right.
it doesn't mean we're not trying to run roughshod over anybody.
But
Spend your money.
it's convention and it's tourism. Yes.
It's probably the most logical place.
Right.
If we have to pull it from somewhere, it's pretty much that or sales tax. And there's a certain amount of logic that it would come out of convention. Plus, I think it's important to note that we are making sure that it stays open and that we understand that this is not an ongoing commitment. We don't plan on doing this year over year. Now, that's obviously because we don't know what the process will look like in transitioning the museum. There could be other expenses in that period that come up that we have to find a way to cover. That's gonna be really difficult to put in the budget. Josh has got his hands full figuring out how to budget for all this right now because it's in flux. But I think that the crux of it is that we wanna make sure we've got kind of a timeline in place so that we have that target and we can move the process along. Because it's really easy for us to have a project that's kind of out on the edge and then we never quite get it done, we never really make it happen, and then it becomes a panic. And I don't want us to be in that situation.
I mean, I agree, that's the best place to bring it from. I just think it would behoove us to at least, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, talk to them, let them know, you know.
Right,
it's
and
one thing.
I mean, I believe they're aware, but no, not in any official capacity, and quite frankly, I mean, that's something that needs to happen, but, I mean, there's a lot.
Ultimately, it's our decision.
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
No,
And I think my opinion from talking to several people involved with it is they understand why the need is there.
Sure.
Because they want it to be open too. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't want that to happen. So I guess if the council wants to move forward with, moving to fund the staff position, the curator position, as well as cover the shortfalls out of that fund, as they arise, because we only know ballpark what they'll be, we can do that. And then, if you want to put the strings of the date on it, we can, or if you want to make that a separate motion, we can, or you can table that part, it's up to the council. I'd point out too, the other reason of the April date is that's the beginning of kind of tourist season.
Right.
So that's when it'll need to be staffed up. So that's why it also made sense as a deadline. But I don't know, how's the council wish to proceed? I mean, are we gonna keep it open for now?
I don't feel
Are
like we
going
have a
to-
lot of choice here, so I'll make the motion, take the money out of convention and tourism to keep the museum open this season. Ongoing discussions on how everything else will play out.
And open this as far as the curator position and
Whatever,
insurance
yeah,
and,
whatever we have to do.
But what about the end date?
you don't
No,
want
I
that in
said
that?
during ongoing
Oh, okay.
conversation.
Okay,
I'd say we keep that a little bit more fluid
I'll
to make
second
sure
that.
that they're able to
okay.
take
So-
that on.
It's been moved and seconded that we move forward with funding the budget shortfall, including the curator position out of convention and tourism funds for the 2024 tourist season, with ongoing discussions in regards to planning for transitions
Where we go from
in
here.
2025 and beyond. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Why don't you want to put an end date on it, Lori?
Because I feel like there's a lot more to this process and then we realize that there's gonna be. And I think we have to be open-minded and getting this whole other entity set up, and I just think we have to keep open minds.
And to be fair, depending on how, negotiations go with, Frontier, the lease versus sale, that'll change the dynamics of the funding as well, because that's something else I've said it many times, and I think most people up here agree, which is that any monies we pull out of that block, we want to keep in the block. So if that means if the house sells, the restaurant sells for $100,000, then that's $100,000 that goes towards the block, as in the museum foundation or whoever the entity is, assuming that would happen beforehand.
So can we put a caveat that they need to get a mechanism in place to take ownership of the museum before the 2025 season? So either get,
In a separate motion.
I think it can be a separate motion, or it can be together. I guess my preference would be that you charge the administrator and myself, maybe admin and finance, whoever you want to charge with, coming back, we'll say the June meeting with kind of marching orders. Like, we'll have had a chance to meet with the Museum Foundation. We will have had a chance to kind of get that draft timeline in place. Because I think they understand what our goal is. I think we understand. And it's not only our goal, it's going to end up being a necessity unless we just want to fund it some other way.
because I don't want to see us get to another year,
I know.
have to do this all over again because nobody
Right.
did their due diligence to get either the foundation or another entity to be a nonprofit, so they could more likely raise more funds.
Absolutely. And I think that's why when Karen was up earlier, I wanted to make sure the conversation was, we're not letting it drop. It doesn't have to be quick, it doesn't have to be pressured, but it needs to be now.
And I don't necessarily think it's somebody not doing their due diligence. I mean, dental practice, for example, doctor's getting ready to buy in. That's something that doesn't happen immediately. He has to set up his own S corp. There's insurances that need to be taken out on everybody. There's just a whole lot of steps and that doesn't involve like a nonprofit that has to be taken. So I think that's us giving them a little bit of grace on making sure their ducks are in a row to be able to shoulder this burden once we pass that baton to them. I guess is where I see it as. I won't, their understanding that this is going to happen, but at the same time, we need to give them their time to be able to do something about that pressure.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Wayne.
As part of the conversation, it's all about what are they doing to get ready. Are you looking at other cities who own museums? Like, are you, on the flip side, looking at, for example, call Fort Payne, Alabama. The city owns museums, and when I talked to the mayor, he was like, I can't imagine not owning these museums. So I'm just wondering, are you looking at the flip side?
Yes, we have.
Oh, great.
We have.
Can I ask who you've talked to?
Several cities in Kansas that do not own museums. They said they would never own a museum. It's not cost-effective for the city to own a museum.
Great.
So-
I'd encourage you to call the mayor at Fort Payne, Alabama.
What's his name?
I don't remember his name, but I can get it for you. I had a long conversation with him, and it was great. So I would just hope that there'd be that balance of
That's good. And
conversation.
to be honest, I haven't had much contact with cities that do. I mean,
Yeah.
to Colleen's point, the ones that I have talked to are ones who either did, or they were going to, or whatever. There seems to be a real reticence of cities to own museums, and I personally feel that too. I feel like it's not a core function of cities, and except in extenuating circumstances, and maybe this was a 50-year extenuating circumstance, then, Lake City owned the depot briefly, that kind of thing.
Right.
Where I look at the city as an intermediary. We're a facilitator of museums better than we're a museum runner. And that's, Frank, it's kind of what we've been doing, is facilitating, but I don't know that we've been doing it well enough.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
okay, so we have a motion on the table to move forward with funding, and we had a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And as far as, yes, ongoing discussions, the conversation will continue, and hopefully we'll have updates, like I said, by the next meeting in June, I hope. Obviously, our city administrator is out at the moment, but I think we'll hopefully have kind of a draft timeline, at least have the conversation farther ahead as far as what we need to do in preparation and what they need to do in preparation, and kind of get that target in sight and keep working towards it. Yes?
Could you clarify the insurance fees, the $18,000, is that on the museum building?
That
No.
block.
So it's all insured as a entity.
It's all one fund in that entire block.
And the insurance is one policy, is that correct?
Correct.
On all buildings?
Yeah,
Everything in that block.
On the
Correct.
Thank you.
yep. Okay. We don't have any other standing committee reports. I know we talked about having a police and fire committee.
got an email about that.
Yeah, I don't think that's been set up yet, but hopefully we'll have that report from that on the next. Do we have any need for any other standing committees between now and the next meeting that you know of? Okay. City attorney is not with us tonight. Does anybody see any need for an executive session? Okay. Next up, we have council comments. Lori, do you have any comments?
Got nothing. I don't have anything. I don't know when we're gonna fill the pool. When does that happen?
That's a good
Started today.
It started today, because I went by and it was still empty, but.
Are we fully staffed?
Well, no.
Close?
We have a lot of lifeguards that aren't trained yet, but we hope that they will get trained. So we got more than we had last year, if they, so we'll see. We're just now getting their schedules and stuff, so. Hopefully, yes. I'm gonna say yes, they're gonna get trained and it's gonna be great.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Better than the last couple of years.
Yep.
Colleen?
Nope.
Nope.
Kevin?
Yeah, you have two. The new lights that we put downtown in front of the
Health
health department. Has anybody been by and looked at them at night? They are not very bright.
No, they're not. I totally agree.
They focus right down on the ground, then there's a black spot, and then there's the other one that comes down.
It's in the street or?
Yeah, the new street poles we put in.
Good
The
for
ones
light
that are,
pollution, but bad for street lighting.
yeah, the ones that are down through the park put out way more light and cover way more area than these new ones do.
I'll
Just
go by
saying
them
that
on the
before
way.
we go buying a whole bunch of them and putting them down Main Street, because they do not put out enough light.
Is it a function of the shade or a function of the bulb, like the wattage?
I think it's a function of the shade, the way it blocks it down.
Is it? Interesting. I'll
So,
check it
but
out.
they do not, there is dark spots between the two lights, definitely, and they don't broadcast even halfway out into the street.
And they are LED, correct?
I'm sure they are, yeah.
And remember when we put the new lights at Feld Field, the whole function there was
Light pollution.
light pollution.
Throw it
And-
down at the ground, make sure
Right.
all the ground is covered.
But this,
But
like,
this doesn't
like
like it's
the,
covering the ground.
it's like the light shades, like they've got them tapered too far, like they need to be brought up and leveled out so it can shine out further.
Interesting. I'll check it out, but good to know that
Yeah,
it may
the
not
other-
be a
yeah.
perfect solution.
Yeah, 'cause, Wayne seen it too, didn't you, Wayne? I'm sorry? The lights downtown in front of there's dark spots between them.
on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other one I had was a pool, just how we were doing on it, and I see we're filling it.
We're filling it. Hopefully, everything is gonna go perfect.
We have people for morning swim, was the question I was asked.
Do we what?
Will we have people for
I have
morning
one
swim?
volunteer, and I think the manager, so we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
If they can come every day or.
I know that management's goal is to have it because,
Right, I mean, but you have
They
to,
know
but
that
I
that's
do know she's
important.
gonna
Yeah.
be out of town
yeah,
for some stuff, so.
okay.
Where we go?
That's all I have, sir.
I just have one thing. I've had several calls about a city code of ours dealing with water and sewer connections. Apparently, if you have a house and a garage, if they're not attached, the garage has to have a separate water meter and a separate sewer meter.
That's correct.
And that's affecting several projects I know in town, and I just don't see a reason for that. I mean, if it's on the same property, I mean, I've been told it's in case they sell the property and they separate the garage and the house, but you could always make them do that if they decide to do that.
I don't know if there was was there a long history of people breaking properties and us having issues?
It's an issue with, we have houses that are tied together that it's an issue. Because back in the day, well, I own both houses, so it's okay, and then it wasn't okay.
I could see us banning that.
But it's in the ULDC, so it would take a text amendment change, it would be a major, I mean, it isn't just something the council can change.
I imagine this is something anyone who builds a shed is not very happy about.
Right. They're
Because
not.
It's a lot more expensive, it's a recurring expense.
Right, cause
Whereas
there's a
the
minimum
fees,
for
yeah,
water, there's a
exactly.
minimum for
To
sewer.
get into
That bathroom or sink in the garage that's
Right.
being used once a year is having a minimum on that stuff, it just, to
It's
me,
hard
it
to
just
know
doesn't make sense.
when somebody builds, what they're really gonna do with it 10 years from now. I guess that's part of your issues there, but yeah, no, it's in the ULDC, it's been there for 20-some years. So that would take a text amendment to change, and it doesn't, it's beyond a council vote, so.
Yeah, Chris mentioned it to me, and I understand the logic, but it does seem like what he said, that it's a little bit like, well, you're kind of, I don't know, solving a problem that probably won't ever exist.
Right, it's like looking into the future at a maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we have rules about property division and things that have to be done when you divide property, so I don't know why this wouldn't fall under that.
Right.
I don't know, I mean,
I
whether.
think it's something we need to look into.
I think it sounds like something kind of new that just surfaced. I'd be interested to see how many properties have 2 water meters, not 2 water meters, one for irrigation, but
Yeah.
one for one structure and the other, because I bet there's not that many in town.
If they have
Right.
separate
For
structures.
residential properties.
Right.
I bet there are not that
Probably
many.
aren't.
And I bet it's something that's just that's surfaced in recent, that,
About 25 years ago when they wrote the ULDC.
well, yeah, but
That's
I'd like to see just how many properties have 2 meters, that one of them is not for irrigation.
Sure, we have a way of looking up how many properties have 2 meters, but do we have notes in there about whether they're structural meters? Well, I guess that'd be how many sewer, that'd be the thing, is how many sewer.
If they have sewer, because
connections.
otherwise you don't pay sewer.
Yeah, so it'd be, how many properties have 2 sewer connections?
Okay.
Well, just residential.
Residential, yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Nah, it doesn't.
It doesn't make sense when they were building, why they would not have just connected that one water line into their water line that's coming from their house.
Because you can't.
Yeah.
City
We
code
don't
does not
it.
allow it. That's what I'm saying. You have to have a separate water meter and a separate sewer
What about the
tap.
water line that goes from my house to the neighbors, that goes under my driveway?
That's not supposed to happen, Lori. That's what I'm telling you.
Surely there's
We have
gotta
sewers
be a
like that,
way,
too.
a paper or a form that can be filled out to navigate
If
that
it's
in certain
ULDC.
situations.
Not if it's on the ULDC.
If it's something we want to explore, I don't know if this is like a water and sewer,
Planning and zoning.
planning and zoning. Okay?
And so what do you mean, what would it take to change it?
It's a text amendment, and I can't remember all the rules of that, because it's a planning and zoning thing about how you have to change the ULDC code. And then the city, after it goes through all them, then the city adopts the ULDC with that change.
Do we know when the planning and zoning committee are meeting next?
Is it this third
That's what I'm trying to remember what the cadence is.
Thursday? Second or third Thursday?
Okay.
I can ask.
Third Thursday would be
Can we
this Thursday, but
Throw this on to them on their agenda?
Yeah, I can have them add that to the agenda when their next meeting is.
I don't know who's
Yeah.
on the committee, but I'd appreciate it to be looked at and see if we can't get some way to navigate that in certain circumstances, because it just doesn't make sense for.
And I think the
little-
final decision, if you look in the code book, is made by the water supervisor.
So they can change it if they need to. I mean, the way I read it, it does not give them the option unless
Right.
it meets the requirement,
Right.
which is a separate tap.
Which is
but
a separate tab.
I would
correct.
think there would be a way to reword it to make it easier for people to beautify the city without having that minimum water and sewer bill for a one sink thing in their garage, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make,
I think in general, we want to encourage people to put up new buildings and
right.
raise the value.
The only way to get
of their
around it now
property.
is if you build a separate building, if it's not attached to your house, has to have a separate sewer, separate water tap.
Correct. That's correct.
then there would have to be some kind of stipulation, because you may make a she shed in the backyard, then it really should have its own little
Right,
meter,
right.
you know?
Well,
You turn your garage into an apartment building and,
And that happens too.
you know,
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, make it to
But as far
where
as just a
if you
regular-
do those things, then you have to do it. But if it's a, you know, a garage or shop or something you're just using on your property,
yeah.
I can't see a reason for it.
I think the biggest issue was that there were too many times it changed what it became from when it was built. So then how do you know when somebody's now living in the
Well,
garage?
their building permit, right?
No, they don't have to get a building permit just to change your garage into a place where someone can dwell.
Punish the mass for a few.
Well, I don't know, I'm just,
I don't
I'm
like
just
that
telling you
idea.
why it happened,
Yeah,
Chris.
no, I get it, I
That's,
get
you
it.
asked, I'm just telling you why.
I'm just saying that,
You
that
know, if
just
all of a
doesn't make
sudden you're
sense.
running a canning business or a home business out of your garage, and you
Right.
use a lot of water, well, then that's a different scenario too,
Sure.
I don't know. I just
But I know
know
the
that.
city's coming up with something, some paper you have to fill out now. I heard Will saying something about a paper you have to fill out if you're running a business out of your house now.
Oh, yeah, and technically, that's a very
So
old,
that's a way
that's
to
an
track
old,
that too. I mean-
if you really do it. Yeah, that is a very old, ordinance, requirement, permit,
But
whatever.
is that completely disconnected from zoning? Regardless of the zone, you're supposed to do that?
Yeah, regardless of the zone, you have to do that.
Yeah, I imagine there's a whole lot of people running home-based businesses not following that.
Depending on which kind of business they are, but that is correct. Yeah, what we found was back to Paula Holly.
Interesting. Okay,
Some people would have to, you know, the one property I know of would have to run like 800 feet to do a separate water meter. I mean, that's not cheap.
no.
I mean, it just doesn't make fiscal sense.
All right,
That's all.
that's all you have?
Thank you.
Okay. Kyle?
Cindy, I told you I'd report on those lights that are turning purple.
Yes.
I forgot to do that. On the east side of Nordis, on the north side of the street, which would be on 36. And I think it's at like 9th and 36 on the north side of those buildings.
Are they finally changing them all?
They did already, but now
they did
we're
already.
starting to get purple ones
I see
again.
them on my morning run.
So we
that
have to
stick out
report
as
them.
very purple, and I'm like, oh.
I hate to
that's
be the
happening
business who put
again,
all
so
those in.
That's all I have.
Evergy did, yeah. And they changed them all.
Really.
The bulbs went bad.
Okay, all you had? Okay, one of the things I had were, first, the Mother's Day market went great this weekend. It was kind of wild trying to have graduation at the same time as the flea market in the park, but between that and they had league track meet down here on Friday. So I had great fun walking around listening to out-of-towners talk about, oh man, they've got that going on, they have this going on, like, sounded like, you know, real city talk, like people from bigger towns than us, really singing the praises that Marysville always seems like there's so much stuff happening here. Like, that's right. So I thought that was great. Weather was good, just perfect timing, because today would have ruined the weekend if it would have happened yesterday or the day earlier. Also, I wanted to, as everyone's noticed, our city administrator's not here tonight.
Yes.
And I wanted to give him congratulations to him and his wife on their new arrival. Fantastic that Marysville's growing with the help of city staff. So,
You know what the new arrival is?
I didn't want to pry.
It's a boy.
Okay, I didn't ask.
Jeff said it's a baby.
It's a healthy little baby, so,
They may
no.
have just got their water bill, we don't
So
know.
try not to bother him about anything you don't need to bother him about, I guess, in the next couple of days. I told him, concentrate on what's important, so.
So he's taking a week off? Is he?
I don't
Does he
know,
wait until the baby gets home?
I don't know, I didn't get that timeline. I told him we'd have flexibility.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, call, email, or, I'm like, no, don't worry about it, so. We ran for longer than I wanted to without
Right.
that administrator, so having one that can still answer, you know, emergency phone calls will be fine.
Yeah.
But that's all that I had.
Awesome. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Jeff's been over here fronting the pit treasure.
Sorry?
Are you gonna vote?
No, can I say something quick? I just want to thank Todd for signing the proclamation for
Oh,
the American
yes.
Legion Auxiliary, and I hope you all remember to wear your poppies for Poppy Day and Memorial Weekend, okay? So honoring the veterans
Yes.
that make them, so, okay?
Thank you, Diane.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you adjourn.
Now, let's see if I can get this thing to turn off. That's always the trick, I can't get it on and I can't get it off.
Yes, I did.
That right there, I was sticking it.
See if I can do it without tearing anything.
ULDC book.
Oh, yeah, that's right. There we go. We'll keep the one that's got a smudge on it. How about that? You can have the pretty one.
Okay, I should have said that right away on the